Why were you barred from Australia?
That is the nature of politics in the era of social media. There is no nuance. You're either the devil or you're God.
Welcome to JLF with Daniel. I'm your host, Rabbi Daniel Levine. Today we are back with Hillel Fuld on the podcast. Hillel, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
So there's a lot that I want to follow up on from our conversation. I think we talked, 8 or 9 months ago. I eventually want to talk. I see that you were barred from Australia. So that was a quite an interesting story. But let's start with one of the things that we talked about last time was we had a little bit of a back and forth about the Trump administration and their position on Israel and whether you were afraid that some of the more anti-Zionist elements of the right would end up, butting into that administration. We're sitting here July 9th, a couple weeks after the U.S. went in, struck Iran. I'm very happy they did that. I assume you are too. What grade would you give the Trump-Vance administration on Israel over the last couple months?
100 being like complete loyalty to Israel?
100 being the most ideal situation you would want to see out of an American federal government towards Israel.
I would go with 93.6.
Okay, I love the specific.
Listen, at the end of the day, after all's said and done, and in terms of what's going to be remembered in history, they've been a friend to the Jewish people. From, again, back then, moving the embassy and the Golan Heights to, of course, striking Iran. That being said, he's had a few weird statements that he made, like when he compared the ceasefire, the end of the war, and compared Iran and Israel. It's like, I'm angry at both of them. Like, really, dude? So he's made some weird comments. There's been a little bit too much pressure for my liking to end the war in Gaza. I understand that, he's Mr. Ending All Wars. I get that. But, he's made a couple of statements that a little bit strange. But again, it's not an exaggeration to say he's the best friend we've ever had in the White House by a long shot.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate, because I've been following you for years, your ability to criticize Trump. I mean, maybe this is just because I'm, very embroiled within American politics, but usually people here are unwilling to give an ounce to the other side. So if you're, a Democrat in America, you're unwilling to say anything positive about Trump, no matter what, and vice versa. If you're pro-Trump, you're never able to criticize him. So I do appreciate,
I got news for you, buddy. I got news for you. That has nothing to do with American politics. It's the same here. That is the nature of politics in the era of social media. There is no nuance. You're either the devil or you're God. And of course, life is gray and it's not black and white, but that's not specific to American politics. In Israel, it's the same thing. You either hate Bibi or you love Bibi. Like, can't you just say that, he's an amazing leader who's been in office too long? Like, that's okay, But on the internet, there is no gray. So this is something that is one of the major downsides of social media.
Yeah, very much so. Are you afraid at all of sort of, I did a podcast a couple weeks ago about the rise of right-wing anti-Zionism. Obviously, there's been historic anti-Semitism on the right, that's old news, but the rise of people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, and even sort of creeping up into members of Congress. I mean, how much does that worry you? I know we were going back and forth. It's sort of hard to make, J.D. Vance's politics, who, seems like he'll be the front runner for the next Republican president. He seemed a little bit less gung-ho about the Iran strike, although obviously at the end, once it was done, he came out and defended it.
So am I worried? Well, I'll answer that question as Hillel Fuld, the whatever you want to call me, and say that, yes, I'm very worried, because these people have massive stages and they're using it like they're not disguising it anymore. They're not even pretending that it's like an anti-Zionism thing. I mean, Candace Owens is a full-blown anti-Semite. Tucker Carlson said things that are deeply, deeply disturbing, as has Piers Morgan. So I'm very worried about them, because they're using this massive platform that they have to just full-blown spread blood libels about Jews. Massively worried. Now, as Hillel Fuld, the observant Jew, believes in God, I'm not worried about anything, because I know how this ends. They're a tool that God's using for whatever he's using it for. So I'm not, when I have those moments and I'm like, oh my God, I have to remind myself, like, dude, come on, like, what are you worried about? Like, this whole war, God's clearly here doing his thing. So, again, it depends who you ask, which Hillel you're asking. But as a religious Jew, I'm not worried at all.
Fair. I like it. You actually, correct me if I'm wrong, you turned down an opportunity to be on Piers Morgan a couple weeks ago. A lot of people, I mean, I totally get why you did that, because he obviously has gone, fully off the deep end. But given his platform, I mean, I'll put it this way. You knew that if it wasn't you, it was going to be some other pro-Israel Jewish guy, which I think they found a couple others. So what went into that decision? I imagine that was a hard decision to say, I don't want to be on this huge platform.
So let me just correct, just for accuracy. This wasn't a few weeks ago. I posted it a few weeks ago. This happened a year ago. his team invited me to the show, and it happened to have been that night I was traveling, and so I said, I'm traveling, I'm going to be on a plane, I can't do it. And they said, okay, we'll find another time. I was like, all right, fine. Then the next day, Piers tweeted something outrageous, like just vile, disgusting, anti-Israel. I don't remember what it was. It was an event that, Israel's dropping 300-ton bombs on kids or some stupid thing like that. And so I answered him. So he went back at me on Twitter. I went back at him, went back and forth around 5-6 tweets, and he blocked me. So I was like, whatever. So obviously that discussion never came up again after he blocked me. But at the end of the day, what happened was, after I rejected him, they had my friend, my mentor, Fleur Hassan, who was the deputy mayor of Jerusalem and is now political commentator and just an amazing woman. And he had her on, and she is infinitely better than I will ever be. And he absolutely butchered her. And he didn't butcher her on the knowledge or the points that he was making. He butchered her that he wouldn't let her get a word out. He just spoke right over her. And that is the reason that I would never go on his show. It's not because I don't think I could, debate him like into the ground. I absolutely could. In fact, today we saw my friend Bridget Gabrielle on the show. I watched it today. I guess it happened yesterday, where he was silenced. He had nothing to say. And so I know that I have the knowledge to, like I said, debate him. But if he's not gonna let me talk, right? And this is what he does. This is his ammo. Like, he asks you questions and he talks over you. So I have no patience for that. It's an ambush, basically. I'm not going into an ambush. So I'm glad that I said no. It's pathetic that he blocked me. Not only did he block me, but I posted, as you saw a couple of weeks ago, it was last week, about this whole thing. He went into my Instagram. This is like so pathetic. He went into my Instagram, found the post, which was already like 10 posts down. It wasn't like my latest post. And he went and he commented as if I was implying that this just happened. And he wrote, this happened a year ago, you, whatever he called me, clown, or what he called me. It's like, dude, what are you, 4 years old? Like, I mean, you don't have to be a psychologist to know when does someone call names, right? This guy, I mean, he's, I just heard a Torah lesson about the upcoming Torah portion. And it was from Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg from Boca Raton. And he said that Balak was the first grifter in history, right? He's like, not Balak, Bilam, sorry. Bilam, it's not the what's it called, the traditional or literal sense, but Bilam is if you look at the word, you separate the word Bilam, it's Biloam, without a nation, because he has no loyalty to anyone. He was a prophet for hire, right? And that's what Piers is. Like, oh, now the world hates Israel. All right, let's jump on that bandwagon. Oh, now Israel's beating Iran. All right, let's go on that bandwagon. Like, he's no loyalty. He has no moral compass. It's just whatever's going to get him more clicks. And I understand. I mean, he's becoming increasingly irrelevant. And so he has to, play these tricks and trick the algorithms to get more traffic. It's pathetic, but that's the reality we live in.
No, it is true. I have no idea what he actually thinks about anything, because it seems like whenever he posts a video, it's like 50-50, depending on it. It really is the epitome of like wherever the wind blows. But no, it is. I mean, it's sad that I think we're in this situation where we have to decide, do you go on? Do you allow yourself to be platformed, and, know you're not going to get a word in and anything like that. I want to talk about, the other interesting thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on is, why were you barred from Australia? I mean, they called you Islamophobic. I mean, it was such a weird story. It ended up, I guess, ending well, because that was, 2 weeks before the Iranian...
It ended incredibly well on so many different levels. So yeah, I mean, the story is absurd. There's no other way to describe it. It's just preposterous. I was supposed to fly on Tuesday morning to Australia, to Sydney and Melbourne, to speak at a gala, a fundraiser for Magen David Adom, an emergency first responder organization that hires and employs Arabs and Jews, saves Arabs and Jews. There's nothing that better shows the opportunity of coexistence than Magen David Adom. And so I was supposed to speak, and my talk was about how Israel's changing the world, Israeli tech, and things like that. It had nothing to do with the war or politics or anything like that. Anyway, I was supposed to fly Tuesday. Friday morning, I got a message from the Australian government. They revoked my visa because of my Islamophobic inflammatory tweets. And they included a document with all the quote unquote inflammatory tweets. Absolutely ridiculous. For example, one of them was that I claimed that there was no massacre in the humanitarian zone, even though the Washington Post and many other mainstream media outlets reported that there was. Of course, the next day they retracted those articles and admitted they were wrong. So my tweet was actually completely accurate. Another one was where I said that, if you look at Islam and you look at the 1.8 billion Muslims in the world, and according to all available data, including the Pentagon's data, 10 to 20% of them are radicalized. So let's go with 10%. 10% of 1.8 billion people is 180 million people dedicated to the destruction of the West. And every one of those radicalized terrorists who blow themselves up and who stab and who ram cars, they do it in the name of Islam. Let's not kid ourselves. They say Allah Akbar as they're doing it. So here you have a religion that gave birth to 180 to 300 million people dedicated to my death and your death in the name of Islam. So I wrote, how is that a phobia? How is that an irrational fear? There's nothing more rational than fearing a religion that gave birth to 180 million fundamentalists. And so that's what I wrote. So, of course, Tony Berg from Australia said, oh, he's saying Islamophobia is good. Ridiculous. There was other things that I said, radical Islam is a global plague, and they said that that's Islamophobic. Ridiculous. Bottom line is ridiculous. So I appealed, and then I went the diplomatic channels, and I reached out to our good friend Mike Huckabee, U.S. ambassador, and I reached out to Israel's foreign minister Sa'ar, and I reached out to Israel's former ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, and really went all the way up, including the ambassador in Australia. They, Ambassador Huckabee wrote an unbelievable letter to the government, and they all did their thing. And my appeal was rejected, and they did not cancel it. They did not reinstate my visa. And I signed off Friday for Shabbat, and I purposely did not go to the press. Like, I spoke to friends of mine at Fox and other places, and I said, this is what's going on. And I spoke to Douglas Murray. I said, this is what's going on. Just letting you know, FYI, this is not, I do not want you to publish this. Do not write about this. I'm just letting you know. And I didn't speak to any media. I came back from Shabbat, and it was like, to say it was viral is like, it was all over the place. I was like, all right, it's out now. So let's do this. So there were hundreds of articles in literally every single publication you can imagine. So, at the end of the day, they did not accept the appeal, which was crazy. And I was very upset. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and they invited me, a couple of days, they invited me to do the talk virtually. So that was fine. And they raised more money because of the media. More people came, and I didn't have to worry about jet lag. And then the Iran war broke out. So I would have been stuck in Australia as my kids are in bomb shelters, shielding themselves from ballistic missiles. So that worked out really well. But I'm not going to say that I wasn't, devastated. This is like 1930s level anti-Semitism. I was pretty upset. Then they poured a lot of salt on the wound, and they banned Kanye West, or Ye. And the entire world of media, like literally from ABC, NBC, CBS, Rolling Stone, like everyone basically wrote an article comparing me to Kanye West. What's his name? Tony Berg's like, yeah, just like I'm banning Hillel Fuld for his Islamophobia, I'm banning Kanye West for his anti-Semitism. I'm like, did you actually just say Hillel Fuld and Kanye West in the same sentence? So in all these articles across the internet, I was compared to Kanye and Candace. You can't make this stuff up. It doesn't get more ridiculous. So that's what happened. And I still can't wrap my head around it, honestly.
Australia has also had a terrible recent anti-Semitism problem that the government does not seem wanting to take care of at all. I mean, friends of mine from, way back when in yeshiva who lived in Australia have, talked about, I mean, it's not getting a lot of press, I think, in America, because we, obviously there's anti-Semitism here and Europe, but there's been synagogues set on fire and just and Australia is not, unlike at least Europe has a long history of anti-Semitism. So whatever form it takes, okay, there was Christian anti-Semitism, nationalist anti-Semitism, now Islamic anti-Semitism, but, it's not really surprising when something anti-Semitic happens in France. I mean, it's sad, but, you're like, okay, what do you expect? It's France. But Australia, I mean, Jews have only lived there for, 100 years. So that's been sad to see. And even, whether or not something is Islamophobic should also be irrelevant. I mean, I assume there are thousands of people right now in Australia saying vehemently anti-Semitic things about Jews in Israel, and they are obviously allowed there. So that's, very upsetting. On the topic of banning visas, one of the big news stories this past week was that Israel officially barred the head of Neturei Karta from entering the country. And I thought that was also interesting. I'm curious what you make of that general. I mean, one, I think there's sort of a general question. Israel's obviously done this in the past. I think Rashida Tlaib also was barred from entry, what is this, 5 or 6 years ago. But barring people who are fundamentally against the existence of Israel. Thoughts, and does it change it if that person's Jewish, like Neturei Karta?
Right. So first of all, generally speaking, a government should not get involved in freedom of speech. General rule of thumb, like the fact that Australia shouldn't ban anyone unless they incite to violence. If somebody's inciting violence, that's a different story. If I was coming to Australia to trash Australia and to call for like a violent uprising against Australia, then I absolutely should have been banned, right? And so the Neturei Karta people, I mean, they literally meet with Ayatollah. Like these are very, I don't care that they don't, listen, there are anti-Zionist ministers in the government in Israel. Like I have no problem if you don't want to support the state of Israel, but violently, like going and supporting violent regimes that want to destroy Israel, that's a red line. And so these people, let alone my personal feelings about them that I don't want to say right now because this will get banned from YouTube if I do. But that's my personal opinions. But other than that, these guys are treasonous on the worst possible level, and they cause very severe damage to Israel's reputation in the world. And that's the last thing we need right now. Obviously we know how it works, right? Oh, look at these Jews. They're they're against Zionism and they're rabbis. Like, they're a couple of hundred people who make an insane amount of noise against Israel. So I 100% support that decision because they went over the red line by supporting the Iranian regime and by extension, all of their proxies. So from my perspective, these people fall under the category, at the very least, of terror supporters, if not terrorists themselves.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make? I was actually just on someone else's podcast talking about Neturei Karta because they've been getting a ton of publicity lately. I was even surprised when I looked up the numbers, and I think it's maybe 1,000 between everywhere, Europe, America, and Israel. Yes, or Neturei Karta for listeners that are surprised living right now in Jerusalem. One can, try to make sense of that. What do you, I mean, my sort of diagnosis is, okay, you have the Orthodox anti-Zionist, Satmar, who's, probably the most famous anti-Zionist group, but they're not, I mean, they're anti-Zionist, but they haven't crossed to the level where they are supporting groups like Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran, like Neturei Karta. Neturei Karta almost it just seems like something broke, where they just became so fixated on the destruction of Israel that the ends justify any means, to the point where they've just completely lost touch with reality. I mean, the only other way, without dipping into too much conspiracies, I mean, I assume, I don't know this for a fact, countries like Qatar and even maybe Iran are trying to pour money into Neturei Karta to sort of bolster the reputation because it looks so bad for Israel. But what do you make of Neturei Karta? Because it's such a strange phenomenon. And, obviously it's terrible when they get all the press that they do, but even just within the Jewish community, I mean, it's such a interesting group.
I mean, I think there's two ways to look at this. There's the biblical way and there's the historical way. Historically, there's never been a generation where we didn't have Jews who sided with the enemy. Never. I mean, we had it in Nazi Germany. You had it always. There were always Jews who sided with the enemy for one reason or another. It's a phenomenon that always existed, and these people are the same. From a biblical perspective, they are the Erev Rav, right? As you know, we had people who accompanied the Israelites out of Egypt who were not Jewish, but became part of the nation, even though they weren't Jewish, because they wanted the perks of, that's what these people are. As far as I'm concerned, they are the Erev Rav. I'm not talking about their genealogy, whether they're Jewish, in their genes or not. From my perspective, again, I know this is a very maybe inaccurate statement just from a legal perspective, from like a Jewish perspective, like you can't become an un-Jew yourself, right? But I would bet money that if you go back into these people's genealogy and their ancestors, there's something very, very weird about them. Because again, this might sound like a little bit like supremacist, but like we are a compassionate people. Like we just are. And the left-wing Jews who, radical liberals, I of course disagree with them strongly, but I understand where it comes from. Not all of them, many of them comes from a place of compassion. Let's talk about the Israeli left. Right? They want a peace process. They want to have peace with our neighbor. I get it. So I met with the New York Times today, a journalist at the New York Times, and I asked them that question. I'm like, is there anything that could ever happen that you'll be like, that's it? There is no possibility for peace. So these people, a lot of them have been converted after October 7th, but many of them, they want peace. It comes from a place of compassion because we're compassionate people. So they take it too far. What these Neturei Karta people are doing is the opposite of compassion. They are literally siding with murderers. So I refuse to believe that these people are actually Jewish. Refuse to believe it. I know that sounds crazy, but I maybe it's a conspiracy. I don't know. But to me, these people have un-Jewed themselves. They've done what the evil son on Passover did and excluded themselves from the Jewish people. As far as I'm concerned, they are not Jewish.
I've even been dipping into, like, I mean, again, it sounds conspiratorial, but there are all these videos now of every Shabbat, a group of Neturei Karta people, 10 a.m. in the morning protesting. And if you're a religious Jew, you are not standing on the side of the street every week on a Shabbat morning. I mean, you're at shul. It just seems like the entire thing has shifted, either in a way, I mean, I don't really know what it could be, because I don't think it's a bunch of, non-Jews dressing up as Hasidic Jews, but there's something strange going on there.
I live in Beit Shemesh. In Beit Shemesh, there's also a very small number of ultra-Orthodox Jews, extremists, I would say, a few hundred of them, maybe. and I'm being kind, who throw rocks on Shabbos at people who are walking in their neighborhood, not dressed modestly, where in Judaism does it say you're allowed to pick up a rock on Shabbos? Like, that is absolutely like forbidden by Torah. Like, what do you do? You're a Jew who's fighting for Judaism and doing something that is literally against the Torah, right? So it's not, a perfect analogy, but yeah, I think there's something very lacking in these people's Judaism. I don't know. I would bet money. I would bet money that if someone goes in depth and actually learns and studies these people, they are not Jewish. Like, I don't know. As I say those words, it sounds crazy to me. So I don't know. But either way, whether genealogy they are not Jewish, they are not Jewish. As far as I'm concerned, they have like divorced themselves from the Jewish people, and they absolutely should be banned from entering this country. No question whatsoever.
Yeah. So another group that I think has been the subject of confusion, because it's another group I would put in the category of they get more press than they deserve, is far right wing / settler / whatever you want to call it, violence against Palestinians in Judea / the West Bank. There's been such conflicted reporting on this where, if you only trust, I don't know, mainstream Western media, you would think that there are hundreds of thousands, of settlers every week, going into Palestinian villages. When I looked into it, it seems like, it's a couple dozen, but, obviously nowhere near the couple 100,000. But why is there so much confusion? Is this just a concerted effort? What do you make of this? Is this a problem? Any and all of those questions.
It's part of a wider phenomenon, which is that if you look at all of the accusations, every single one of them being thrown at Israel, literally every single one of them are the things that our enemies are guilty of. Every single one of them, right? So let's start from obviously genocide. Genocide? Really? Go look at the footage from October 7th. That is genocide. Apartheid? We're apartheid? Try going into try walking into Ramallah. See what happens if you walk. That's apartheid. We're killing indiscriminately. Do you see what Hamas does to its people? We're attacking civilians. Do you see what Iran did? Every single place that they attacked was a civilian destination. So every single thing they accuse us of is exactly what they're guilty of. And that's exactly why they're doing this settler thing, this violent settlers. Like, okay, there are a couple of criminals out there who happen to be living in Judea and Samaria, but violent settlers or Jewish terrorists is not a thing. There is no such phenomenon. There are criminals. And to call someone a violent settler or a Jewish terrorist is no different than calling someone a secular rapist. Like, what does the fact that he's secular have anything to do with his crime? This is a person who is violent, who's a criminal, who should be in jail. It has no bearing on the fact that he lives in Judea and Samaria. This is not done in the name of Judaism. This doesn't represent me. And those X amount of people who do this are denounced and condemned by 99% of Israeli society. And if you're comparing that and you're using the same word, terror, as you're using for 180 to 300 million radical Muslims who are blowing themselves up, ramming cars, stabbing people in the name of Islam, where the rest of the Muslim world, obviously not the entire Muslim world, but the vast majority are silent. They're silent. I mean, is your feed full of Muslims denouncing it? Because mine isn't. So let's not use the same word to describe, 100 violent people who happen to live in Judea and Samaria and are criminals to hundreds of millions of people who murder thousands and tens of thousands of people in the name of Islam. Those two things are not the same. So the whole thing is just a projection. It's like, oh, we have these, radical Islamists who are violent. Let's put that on the Jews. If the next time someone says that to you, they say that Jewish terrorists, right? Violent settlers, look them in the eye and say, name me three. Give me three names of people. They'll say Baruch Goldstein. Maybe they'll name the situation where an Arab town was lit on fire and was burned, whatever. They won't even know the name of that person. They can't name three terrorists. Like, it's not a thing. It's a thing in the Western world because they want to paint the Jews as equal to the Muslims, but there is no equal sign. It's not the same. And it's I wrote even last week when there was some sort of incident, I wrote if this indeed happened, like, I'm denouncing it. I am condemning it because I expect that from the Muslim world. I have to do it myself. And so I condemned it. The next day it came out that investigation was bogus and there was actually no incident, which on the one hand, it's like, okay, I felt stupid and a lot of people were writing me, see, you were wrong. Okay. On the other hand, you know what? I think it was a responsible thing for me to do at the time when I was given that information that it did happen. I'm proud of the fact that I stood up and denounced and condemned it. Of course, at the end, it didn't even happen. So it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. And like you said, in the introduction to this question, they're getting way too much attention, including this conversation. We shouldn't even have this conversation because we're legitimizing it. It's not a thing. It never was a thing and never will be a thing because terror and violence is paradoxical to everything that Judaism stands for. So it's just not a thing.
Yeah, I mean, just on the subject, I saw this morning the New York Times ran an op-ed by, 6 New York rabbis that they were supporting Mamdani, and this was a big news story. And I was reflecting, and I'm like, there must be at least 5,000 rabbis. I mean, if you count the Hasidic community, where essentially everybody gets smicha, maybe even 10,000 rabbis in New York City. The fact that they found 6, I mean, that should not be a news story. It should be another news story. 9,000,
Right.
994 rabbis come out against Mamdani, 6, and so it's so warped.
But
I mean, I
it's the
feel the
token
same.
Jew, though. It's a token Jew. That's what they love that, right? Like I call them the as a Jew Jews, right? Whenever I write a post about like a milestone in the war, we got this commander, we got that. There's always, without exception, someone in my comments. As a Jew, we don't promote. First of all, as a Jew, you don't know what the hell you're talking about because you clearly don't actually know the scripture where the Jewish people, the Israelites, sang to God on the sea when the Egyptians were drowning. And we repeat that song every single day in our prayers. So it absolutely is a value of Judaism to celebrate, when evil is eliminated. It says in the Torah countless times, you get rid of, you eliminate the evil amongst you. It is 100% a Jewish value. And so these people who come in, they know, like, they know how to nitpick and say, but there's this one, verse or this one midrash that says that, when the Egyptians were drowning, like token Jews. As a Jew, would you stop at that already? Like but the West loves it. They love it. Oh, we found a Jew who's against Israel. It must be that Zionism is bogus. It's so ridiculous, and it is just, it's comical. I don't know what else to call it. It's comical.
Yeah, I feel the same way on campus whenever people talk about the rise of young anti-Zionist Jews, where, okay, maybe it's higher than, 6 out of 1,000, but maybe 10 or 15%. But I think the more interesting news story is, despite all of the social, political, and academic pressure to become rabid anti-Zionists, 85% of young Jews on campus are still supporting Israel. I mean, that's the much more interesting news story than the fact that 10% of Jews have fallen into the, queer peer pressure of everything from social groups to, most Jews are obviously liberal, to, the push of liberalism and academia. And so, but of course, that never gets any press. And you would think, just reading, the LA Times and New York Times, that, oh my God, you meet a young Jew and 2 out of 3 chance they are, radically anti-Zionist. And, yeah, it definitely sickens me as somebody who works with students all day. And yeah, two other things that I wanted to get your thoughts on. These are sort of crowdsourced questions from people.
One second. Let me just cut you off here for 1 second.
Please.
I just have to say one thing. And this is, it's really time we yelled this from the rooftops, because it's the narrative of an anti-Zionist Jew. A Jew who does not support Zionism is the equivalent of a Christian who does not support Christ, or a Muslim who does not support Mecca, or a million other analogies. Zionism is as core to Judaism as Mecca is to Islam, okay? It says Zion zillions of times. We pray towards Jerusalem for thousands of years from around the world. We pray and we beg Hashem to bring us back to Jerusalem, which is Zion. Zionism is 100% core to Judaism. You cannot separate those two. And if you are an anti-Zionist, you are anti-Jewish, not only from a theological perspective, but from a historical perspective, because after what the Jews endured, if you think that the Jews don't deserve a safe haven in their homeland, their ancestral homeland where they're indigenous, then you are anti-Jewish. If you think that after the Holocaust, Jews don't deserve a homeland amongst countless Muslim and Christian states in the world, that the Jews don't deserve one state, you are an anti-Semite. And let's just not sugarcoat this anymore. You cannot be an anti-Zionist who's not an anti-Semite, and you cannot be a Jew who's against Zionism. If you're a Jew who against Zionism, then your Judaism is lacking. If you're a Christian who doesn't believe in Christ, or a Muslim who doesn't believe in Mecca, then you're not a Muslim, a religious Muslim who sticks to his or her tradition. You are a Muslim who's lacking in your Islam. And if you're a Jew who doesn't believe in Zionism, your Judaism is lacking. You are a less good Jew. Let's just say it as it is. It's time we stopped apologizing for this already. Just stop. I'm not an anti-Semite, just like an anti-Zionist. Shut up already. It doesn't. It's such a ridiculous, ludicrous statement. You cannot be an anti-Zionist without being an anti-Semite. Period. Full stop, with no exceptions. Okay, go on with your question now.
No, I agree with the fact that if you are an anti-Zionist Jew, there's something clearly lacking in your Judaism, and oftentimes there is. I mean, oftentimes it's just people who are using left-wing politics as sort of this Trojan horse, or Judaism is a Trojan horse for left-wing politics. And again, our tradition is, 5,000 years old. It's very vast. You can find, as you said before, any number of statements that seem to support whatever agenda you want to push forward, but that bears no consequences on whether or not you have general knowledge over everything, and the 5 opinions that might disagree with you, those are always pushed out. The 2 crowdsourced questions that I had, this is going to be a very American question, so I'll sharpen it a little bit. The very American side of the question is, what is your preferred quote unquote solution for the future of the region? The sharpened version, based off of recent news, is 1, annexation is back in the news of Judea and Samaria. 2, this report came out a couple weeks ago that the head imams of Hebron came out and said that they're willing to join the Abraham Accords in, a deal that would, be quite fascinating. So I'm curious what you make of those 2 developments. What might you want to see in the next year?
So, when it comes to this stuff, it's hard for me to not be the geopolitics, whatever commentator, whatever you want to call me. It's hard for me to take this keep off my head when it comes to this stuff, right? I mean, like an imam in Hebron wanting to form a relationship and a partnership with Israel. This is like messianic stuff. I mean, we all grew up learning that one day the world will recognize Israel's greatness. And I'm like, really? What? Palestinians are going to recognize our greatness? And here we have an imam like saying that it's wild stuff. So first of all, from that perspective, it's unbelievable. And same thing for annexation. Like, enough with this already. Like, it's our home. Like, the fact that we're even having this discussion, like, we should have annexed this a long time ago. Now, of course, there are complexities, right? What do you do with the Arabs there? I get it. Like, but at some point, and this is just my opinion, at some point you got to say, listen, the world's accusing us of apartheid nonstop. So what happens when we annex the West Bank and the Arabs there can't vote? We're going to be an apartheid plus? Like, what's the next apartheid ultra? Like, what do we become then? Right? So if you're accusing us of apartheid, then let's at least do it's in our best interest, which is annexing our home, our land. And okay, we got to figure out a solution for those Arabs that live there who will obviously not have equal rights because they won't be voting for the Knesset. We'd have to figure that out. I'm not belittling that. It is an issue. But at some point, you got to say, you know what? They're accusing us of us doing this anyway. At least let's just do what's right for us. That's just, it's like, you're going to keep accusing us. Then let's, maybe I shouldn't say this, but like, you're accusing us of genocide. Okay. So let's get our hostages out and let's do what we need to do. Like, why are we tiptoeing around our enemies who did what they did on October 7th? So I get it that we have hostages there. We can't just flatten the place, but I don't, the whole narrative of like, oh, they're innocent Germans in Nazi Germany too. Nobody cares. That's not how war works. There are innocent people in Japan too. That's not how war works. They started a war. They lost the war. Stop calling it genocide. It's called you losing the war, right? So, again, for me, it's like, okay, you're already accusing us of that. All right, we're going to do it.
I think the most perverse thing is like almost the converse of what you said, which is that because Israel is not willing to ethnic cleanse, genocide, do all these things that Israel's constantly be accusing of, more soldiers are being at risk every day. I mean, it's sort of obvious from anybody looking, if Israel just decided on October 7th that, okay, we're done, we are going to commit genocide in Gaza, I'm glad morally they didn't, but it certainly would have been safer. You wouldn't have, still soldiers dying every single day. The very fact that Israel is going on the ground with, obviously the most effective way to take over Gaza or different cities is not to put in soldiers when you know that there are tunnels everywhere and, people hiding with RPGs behind every wall. And so, I wish people just understood that better, that's, I think, the most perverse thing. Every time I hear people accusing the IDF of genocide, it's, because soldiers are specifically at risk because Israel is not willing to do X, Y, and Z.
But it's a much broader thing where not only is their narrative one big lie, but it's one big contradiction. They just contradict themselves constantly, and the list is so long. You mentioned ethnic cleansing. Like, again, they're accusing us of ethnic cleansing. Dude, do you know how many Jews there were in all these Muslim countries 100 years ago? They ethnically cleansed the Jews, right? Colonialists, we're colonialists. Have you seen a map? Like, have you seen what the Arab Muslim world has done to the map? And have you seen how tiny Israel? We're colonialists. Again, they're accusing us of what they did, right? It's just ridiculous. But the genocide thing, again, like, you don't have to know anything. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a historian. You don't have to be nothing. Just be a 3-year-old with logic. If we wanted to commit genocide, and you know how strong Israel is because we demonstrated that against Iran, why is Gaza not flattened? Why is Gaza not erased? Clearly, like you said, we're sending in foot soldiers, risking our own children. Well, and not to mention the fact, that what other genocide in history could the people being genocided end the second they want to? Like, this is genocide. We're committing genocide. Hamas and Gaza could end the war now in a 30-second phone call. Here, take your hostages back. We're laying down our weapons. Done. Genocide. Can you imagine Hitler coming to the Jews and saying, hey, I'm going to kill you all unless you do this? Like, that's not genocide. They could end it right now if they wanted to. So it's just, the lies are just so, I don't know, it's just so ridiculous that otherwise intelligent people believe these things. You don't have to know anything. You just have to have logic. Just listen to what you're saying. You're saying that you want from the river to the sea, and you also want a two-state solution. Are you mentally stable? Do you hear what you're saying? Like, two-state solution means two states. From the river to the sea means one state. Erase Israel, right? Like, which one is it? Globalize the Intifada and ceasefire now. Are you normal? What? Globalize the Intifada and ceasefire now? Those things contradict each other. They're mutually exclusive. You can't have both. The list is endless. But that's what happens when your entire identity is based on a lie. Like, from day one, 1964, PLO, what were they liberating? There was no occupation. What was Arafat liberating? Go read his charter. He wanted every inch of Israel. So this whole thing is bogus from day one. And when you lie, you have to keep piling up the lies, and they just don't end. But it's gotten to a point that the lies are actually, at this point, just like ridiculous, just so ridiculous that people believe this stuff. It's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, no, the UC Irvine encampment, which was right outside of where I taught medieval Jewish thought last year, there was a giant two signs, globalize the Intifada and ceasefire now. And every time I passed it, whatever students I was with, Jewish, not Jewish, it didn't matter. I pointed out, I was like, whatever you think of this issue, we don't have to go into it, but just notice these two signs cannot possibly both be true at the same time. And so, I think that was, helpful that they belied their message there. The thing that you somehow incite the most controversy around, which is actually a position that I'm surprised by that you hold, is Haredim going to the IDF. Every time you post about it, you seem to just have like a war in the comment section. Just so I understand your position, and then I would love to just discuss it, because it is sort of surprising that you hold it, is that Israel should not pressure Haredim, especially, young yeshiva bachers, to go into the IDF, despite the fact that Israel is obviously relying very heavily on reservists over the last 2 years. And, maybe 5 years ago, one would say, okay, the IDF doesn't really need additional people. It seems hard to argue now, as, I have friends, and I'm sure you have, many more people, who essentially their lives in the last 2 years, even if they're in their 20s or 30s or 40s, have been completely derailed because of having to spend, months in miluim / reserve duty. What do you make of this? And I'm curious, why this is such a strong line for you.
So first of all, it's not. And I'm kind of upset that you think it is. Like, obviously, I wasn't clear about my opinion on this. My opinion is absolutely not black and white. Like most things, I try to be nuanced. Fundamentally, we didn't have the IDF for thousands of years, and we survived. And we survived for one reason only. Even in Egypt, we survived because we maintained and we kept our tradition and our names, right? And so the Torah is all we had. That's all we had all these thousands of years. We never had the IDF. So if tomorrow, God forbid, the state says every single Haredi, leave your yeshiva now, go draft, put on, Israel will cease to exist. Like, I fundamentally believe that. Without Torah, we have no right to be here. And that's not even a religious statement. Look at Ben Gurion, the most secular / anti-religious person ever, stood at the UN with a Tanakh, with the Bible. Our only, justification to be here is Torah. If there's no Torah here, there's no state. And so the thought of literally taking all of these people who are learning Torah and saying, stop learning Torah, go to the army, to me is illogical. But hold on. The vast majority of them are not sitting and learning. The claim from their rabbi saying, even if they're not learning, they shouldn't go to the army because they grew up in a Haredi bubble. And if they go to the secular army, it's going to ruin their entire education and everything they learned. Bogus. If a person's not learning Torah, get your butt in uniform now, right? But if a person is learning Torah, and I don't care if they're like a prodigy, or I don't care how smart they are. If a person's dedicating his life to learning Torah, the Jewish state should fund that. But again, it's nuance. It's not all, and it's not none. And I'll tell you even more than that. We were talking about media bias. There's tremendous media bias about the Haredi people serving. My son is in a Haredi unit. There are many Haredim serving. And on the flip side, there are many secular people who don't serve. Go to Tel Aviv, every other person is not drafting. So again, the media portrays this as black and white. The Haredim don't serve, the secular do. False, not true. And a person who's learning Torah, in very similar to the issue of public transportation, right? If you're a secular Jew in Tel Aviv, by all means, go to the beach on Shabbos, do whatever you want. But for the Jewish state to fund public transportation and desecrate Shabbos as a state, that's preposterous. So the Jewish state should fund Torah learning. If a person's learning Torah, he should be able to continue learning Torah. If a person is not learning Torah, get your butt in uniform now.
All right, I know you're
It's not
trying
so
to
black and
leave for
white. It's not. It's not
no,
so
no, no.
black and white.
I appreciate that. I know you're trying to leave for dinner soon, but I want to dig in a little bit more, and then whenever you get tired of it, you can just tell me that you're hungry and want to leave. On the question of the IDF not existing for thousands of years, one might say, well, yes, but the state of Israel also didn't exist. So that logic could end up becoming the Orthodox anti-Zionist position, which is for thousands of years we've survived without both an army and a state. So that I think that type of reasoning can, lead you astray quickly. The other question, just on the buses case, because it's always, I always find a very interesting question. We can also add to it, the debate about chametz in hospitals that was happening a couple of years ago. I mean, how much, and I know this is sort of a little bit of a tangential question, but how much halacha slash, Jewish law do you want to see wrapped up within the inherent mechanism of the state? In other words, Israel should, I agree with you, fund Jewish learning and Jewish initiatives, and many rabbis are actually paid by the government. I think that's good. But at a certain point, when the government starts restricting people based off of religious law, that's not something that you're saying, but others might argue it's one thing to not fund buses on Shabbat. It's another to say you are not allowed to say, I don't know, what's our favorite example? Raise pigs and, sell pork, which, I know Israel's debated back and forth. So I'm curious to get your thoughts both on, that follow-up question about the IDF and then also just general Jewish law in the state.
It's a fair point about the IDF, but again, I think we're in a new reality. We have a state, but that doesn't mean we have to erase everything else that we've had throughout the years. So we need both. Yes, we need an army, and if we sit and learn Torah all day long, that's also not a Jewish value. I mean, you know this, the Rambam. I mean, every one of our great scholars worked, right? So it's also not a value or a concept in Judaism that I only learn Torah. It's not a thing either. So again, it's nuance. It's both, right? But again, either extreme is bad, like most things, right? All of them should learn to, you should be exempt, bad. All of them should draft, also bad, right? It's nuanced. What was the second question again? Oh yeah, no. Listen, it's a very slippery slope, right? Of course, telling a secular Jew, you can't go to the beach on Shabbos. That's insane. I mean, that's no one's saying that, but I'm just going to the extreme here. That's insane. But from that to you can go to the beach, as a Jewish state, I'm not going to fund that. Those things are very, very, very different. So where do you draw the line? Should chametz, it's a good example. Should chametz be allowed into a formal hospital run, that's given funds by the state, et cetera? If it's a private thing, of course, do whatever the heck you want. But if it's a government, funded hospital or that gets support from the government to bring chametz, it's not like I'm saying to you, wear a kippah when you come in the door. Like, be respectful. Like, you don't eat chametz on Pesach. Like, really, like, you can't bring in something that just be respectful. Like, I agree with you that it's a very complicated issue, but it's sad that it's a complicated issue, because if we had a little respect for each other, it wouldn't even be an issue. Like, can't you just not eat chametz in the hospital? Like, just be a little respectful. Like, it's deeply offensive to someone to be around chametz on Pesach. You're a Jew. Like, be respectful. And you know what? Here's really the bottom line, and that is that the media, it works on all of us, including you and including me. The reality is that 90 whatever percent of Israel does Seder on Pesach, right? They respect their heritage, right? You wouldn't even believe how many quote unquote secular Jews do Friday night dinners. Like, the media would have you believe that there's two Israels here. We hate each other. We have nothing in common. When in reality, if you put the most, Haredi extremist in the room with the most tatted up, like covered in piercings, secular guy from Tel Aviv, you put them in a room and you gave them a list of 1,000 core values, they'd probably agree on 980 of them. 20 of them they disagree on, and that's the 20 that the media likes to focus on. In reality, we have a lot more in common than we have different. And so, it's a question of respect, but it also, it's kind of like a snowball effect, because, there's that one guy who wants to come into, a hospital with chametz on Pesach because he's anti, and he wants to and so that's what they're going to report. Like the 6 rabbis, they're going to report that. And then, this guy in Tel Aviv, he couldn't go in with chametz. Now I'm going to show them. And like, it perpetuates more and more hatred, but that's what the media does, because hatred gets clicks. And so they depend on poison for relevancy, because we know what media, is happening. They're getting decimated by social media, even though social media algorithms are the same. But the New York Times or any other, they will not get clicks. They will not get traffic unless they show poison and hatred. So that's what they do. And they again, it's a snowball effect, but the reality is very, very different. The reality is, if you get your car stuck on the side of the road, you won't wait 30 seconds before some person stops, whether they're Haredi, whether they're secular, whether it doesn't, we're all family here. And that is the reality. The rest is propaganda.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. Is there any other, final thoughts on any of this?
No, I love talking to you, man. You have great energy. You remind me of Shabbos Kestenbaum.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I've been trying to meet him for a while. I know he's been very busy
Oh,
lately, but one of these days.
yeah. I'll intro. No problem.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And enjoy your dinner. And I
Okay.
really appreciate, all of your opinions that, I don't know, inspire a great conversation. So
Appreciate it. All right, man. Take care.
you too. Bye.